You're listening to a special presentation from Night of the Living podcast, Zoned Out, the Twilight Zone Revisited with Joe and Freddy. Joe.
Joe and Freddy, Freddy and Joe, Joe and Freddy, then the Freddy and Joe. Yeah.
Perfect kind of vibe for execution.
Because why else wouldn't you? I mean, why wouldn't you have a scat jazz little intro a cappella for an execution? Of course.
That music is partly what will make our main character go off the deep end in one scene.
That's right.
So execution. This one aired April 1st, April Fool's Day, 1960.
Ooh.
This was the first of three directed by David Orrick McDermott, who is going to come back in A Thing About Machines and Back There. The second of 7 episodes, based on a story by George Clayton Johnson. We already talked about The Four of Us Are Dying, but he also wrote Logan's Run. Bunch of cool stuff. The guy actually kind of reminds me of, when you see pictures of him, kind of like an Alan Moore type of. He has like real long beard, long hair, kind of like you get the impression this guy was not part of mainstream society in any way whatsoever.
A little bit of a hermit, maybe.
Yeah. No music credits listed for this episode. This is a cast of 10, including Serling. And I do think go back to the music thing. It's interesting because there is like a very specifically like a Western, spaghetti Western type of riff in this guitar music that's in parts of the episode.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I don't know who wrote that or performed it, but no biggie. We have in that cast of characters, Joe Caswell, who's the condemned man who this story revolves around. Professor Mannion, who everyone's going to spot immediately. That's the professor from Gilligan's Island, my friends.
No Marianne, though.
No Marianne. Now he's the mad scientist who is running a time machine. We have Paul Johnson, this character. Paul is just kind of a dirtbag modern day criminal when we get to him. He's the modern counterpart to our main character, Joe. And then there's the old man in the first portion of this episode. That's George Mitchell. He's gonna we've already seen him in The Hitchhiker, but he's gonna come back in Jess Bell and Ring a Ding Girl.
Ring a Ding Girl.
Great title. I'm
looking forward to those.
All right, you want to get into the story on this one, Joe?
Sure. So it starts out, and we're clearly at a hanging. For those who aren't familiar. It's old Western looking. There's a bunch of people on horses. There's clearly a noose for someone to be hung, and the voiceover does the synopsis with commonplace, if somewhat grim, unsocial event known as a necktie party. The guest of dishonor, a cowboy named Joe Caswell, just a moment away from a rope, a short dance several feet off the ground, and then the dark eternity of all evil men. Mr. Joe Caswell, who, when the good Lord passed out a conscience, a heart, a feeling for fellow men, must have been out for a beer and missed out. Mr. Joe Caswell, in the last, quiet moment of a violent life.
So the interesting thing about Joe there, that's Albert Salmi is that actor. This is the first of 3 episodes he's going to be in. He's coming back in A Quality of Mercy, and of late, I think, of Cliffordville. But he was most famous for being in the Brothers Karamazov Escape from the Planet of the Apes. We got more Planet of the Apes here.
Man, just like last week.
Yep. Dragon Slayer, which is a movie I really love with him and Peter McNichol, I want to say. From the 80s.
Is that the one with he's got the Peter McNichol, the blonde fro?
Yeah, he's got like curly hair, and he wears like the necklace with the little glowing crystal on it.
Yeah, I used to love that movie.
Yeah, it's a good one. This guy was also in Caddyshack. A whole lot of shit you ain't never heard of, but a lot of stuff. But great filmography. But this is the fella I teased last week, has the real dark side.
Oh,
Yeah, so on April 23rd, 1990, he and his estranged wife were both found dead in their Spokane home by a friend who stopped by to check in on them. And according to the newspapers, he had shot her in the kitchen and then killed himself in an upstairs bedroom.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that's like this guy also notoriously I think had a real bad problem with alcohol too, from what I've read about
Wow.
him. But I think it speaks a lot to the performance this guy gives is unhinged at times, but it's perfect.
Yeah.
So
Holy
good.
cow.
Yeah. So go for it, Joe. Sorry, I didn't mean to lay that heavy shit on you right before you got back into the story, but I
I'm
thought
still reeling from it.
Yeah.
And he actually, I will say through this whole thing, he really puts on a hell of a performance. It's, as I find with most of the stuff, the first viewing of it is like, okay, I get the message, I get the idea. And then a second viewing, you get to really look at the way people act and the actors themselves kind of do a little bit more deeper analysis. And this character is played perfectly, I think, for what they're doing and like their character and the personality and all of that. So it starts out 1880.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just gonna say it also like this has he somehow manages to one up the window breaking scene from the episode was it I Shot an Arrow? No, it wasn't I Shot an Arrow. It's the one where they're disappearing one by one, the crew of the space flight.
Oh, let's see. No, wasn't it the one where you can't fall asleep?
No, that's
Time Enough. No,
that's
not Time
Perchance to Dream, where the guy he eats himself out the window at the end. I'm thinking of the one where the astronauts are disappearing, one by one, and the guy busts through the window of the bar looking for his buddies, like Harrigan or whatever, and he screams his name.
He hulks through the wall.
Yeah,
the door.
They went up that
Ron.
shit in this episode with this actor, this Joe Caswell, and possibly his stunt double, I presume.
Okay.
They go way beyond that.
There's some great moments in this, which every time I think about like looking at the actors and I'm like, that's clearly a stunt double. I forget that TVs back then, you weren't looking at the detail. They weren't big TVs. They were tiny TV, all that stuff where you're not going to notice the details. But man, that stunt double was somebody totally different. But that part, when he does that, it's hard to tell because they keep his face down for most of it.
Yeah, they cover.
But I think he actually does stand up at one point. Like I looked at that one because I think it was one continuous shot. That one where
should we wait till we get to that point in the story?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Joe. I put the cart before the horse there. Yeah, I didn't.
It's all good.
Yeah, I don't want to derail.
It's not a.
We just need when we get to it. When we get to
anything.
that scene, I think that's when we need to. We'll get into it when we get to that scene.
Right on. This is definitely one worth watching. So we find out later that it's 1880, and there's this outlaw cowboy named Joe Caswell. He's about to be hanged for murder, and the other people there we see are the sheriff, the preacher, and we find out the wronged father, the guy who Joe Caswell shot. And so he's standing there, and he's got some great dialogue, some back talk to the preacher, and he's like, why don't you just, that Bible ain't gonna do me any good, so why don't you just hurry up and get along with it? And it's just great dialogue. But he's very villainous. He's got very that kind of like, I don't care about all you. He remind me a lot of Johnny Cash, 15 Minutes to Go. That whole kind of personality there. And so they're like, all right, well, let's go get to hanging. And the one guy comes up and smacks the butt of the horse to get it to run away so that he hangs. And this is actually kind of a violent episode in a lot of ways. So this is the first of that where the horse goes riding off and you see his feet kick out, and then it pans over and it shows the shadow of him hanging, which I think was probably a good way to do it. And then as he's hanging there, he disappears out of the noose. And it's like, what? And even the preacher and the sheriff are like, what just happened? And we see him appear later, and he's laying down, and the professor is hanging over him. I'm going to have a hard time calling him anything but the professor.
I mean, he's still the professor.
Yeah. For those who don't know, who didn't grow up in the 80s, there was a show called Gilligan's Island. This actor played a character called the Professor, very distinctive face and personality, and I will never be able to think of him as anything else.
Same.
But he's a scientist in this one, so that's close enough. And he's explaining that to Caswell. His name is Mannion, or his last name is Mannion. Explains that Caswell, that he plucked Caswell out of the past. He doesn't know who he is, but he's going to show him all kinds of things about the future. He's telling him he's the first human time traveler, and Caswell's Caswell's like talking real like hoarsely, and he's kind of writhing around with his neck, and the professor looks down at his neck and sees some really deep rope burns around his neck. And so the Caswell kind of passes out, and we clip to the professor dictating into a machine. He's talking about what he's seen, so you're getting a lot of exposition this way. He's like, well, here's what I know. He's Joe Caswell. He was around this time, this place. And in his dictation, it's clear that Caswell has told him nothing about being hanged, of course. He just says he was a
Cattleman, basically.
Cattle. Yeah, cattleman. And during this time, and he's like, there's something disturbing about the rope burns around his neck, or there's marks on his neck. I'm not sure. And he said, and there's something that's hardly scientific, but I'll note it anyway, that I don't like him. I don't like the looks of him.
Right.
Something's disquieting about him. And so he finishes his dictation, and moments later you see Caswell actually open the door and come in, and they start talking. And so the professor's trying to get more information out of him, and Caswell's like, well, I want to see this city that you talk about with the horseless carriages and all this other stuff that you say is out there. And he's like, no, we'll see it, but first I want to know a little bit more about you. And so he's like, I want to know about what things you know about. Like, there's some things that should still be consistent, like right and wrong, and this and that. And Caswell goes, well, I know all about right and wrong. Once there was a deputy sheriff in Dodge City that tried to beat the difference between them into my back with a wet rope. I know all about right and wrong.
Wet
Some
rope.
great dialogue in here. Yeah. Oof. That's painful. So Mannion's, again, the professor's, his name is Mannion, is trying to learn more about it. He's like, what about justice, Caswell? What about justice? And Caswell's like, am I supposed to know about justice? They're kind of doing this look exchange.
This
of
great
like,
monologue from him.
Yeah. He's like, tell me what I'm supposed, kind of like, am I supposed, like, you suspect something about me? He doesn't say that, but it's like, that's the kind of look. And Mannion says, well, more than most men, probably. Right and wrong they can beat into you, but justice, Caswell, this came at the end of a rope, didn't it? And so he's letting him know, oh no, I see your rope burns. I know what's going on. There's something going on here. And so he kind of accuses him. I pulled you back out of being hanged, didn't I? And he said, you killed a man, didn't you? And Caswell's like, I killed a whole territory full. I stopped counting after 20. It's like, ooh,
yeah,
that's dark. And he's not, once the jig is up, he's like, I'm not going to try and hide this from you anymore. He's like, right. I killed a whole bunch of people.
Starts fingering that lamp. So, this is a nice lamp, by the way.
Well, it's funny because, this is the part where you're like, you're thinking about the characters. And of course, this is a scientist, right? So he's not thinking about, he's clearly thinking about things, but not thinking, he's the book smart. He's not the street smart, right?
He doesn't get the danger he's brought into his laboratory.
Right. And in addition to that, he's pushing back, and he's like, I might have to send you back. I might have to send you back to that place, to that moment. He said, and he's like, it's like, dude, you're going to send him back to get hanged? He's not going to be cool with that, right? Like, And so this is a really interesting thing. They start doing this kind of dialogue, and Caswell's the villain. There's no question about that. But the dialogue they have is really insightful and interesting because you start thinking about the way the world is now and the way the world was in the Wild West. When they talk about being the Wild West, being this kind of this frontier where there's laws, but it's like, it's what we've said the laws are, right?
There's no social safety net either. There's
Right.
no established real healthcare system. There's
Yeah.
no, you don't have, you have rights, like you have constitutional rights, but really no one to enforce them. No way to
And
enforce them.
there's so few people that, like, unless the people hold each other accountable, nobody's going to be held accountable, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the beginnings of that social structure, or a social structure that's like, maybe because it's out in the wild. So they actually kind of get into this. And so Mannion is the professor's trying to convince him, like, you did terrible things. What about those 20 men you killed, Caswell? Did they died with no discomfort? And Caswell starts laying into him about, like, you don't get this. So he said, this is great dialogue. And there's a couple pauses in here. He goes, Mister, you're just talking words. Justice, right and wrong, they sound good in this nice warm room with a nice full stomach, just a few feet away from a soft bed. They sound nice and they go down easy. But you just trying them on an ice cold mesa where there's another man's bread or another man's jacket stands between you and staying alive. You get in this machine of yours and you go back to where I was and you talk about your law and your order and your justice. They're going to sound different, mister. I know you're kind. You're clean-faced. You're Johnny-come-lately dandies. You come out and your warm trains rolling over the graves of men like me. I just hate your kind. And with that, he grabs him by the lapels, throws him back, and if you watch this, the stunt double, that looked really painful because he tumbles over the desk and lands like on his shoulders, and his whole body basically folds in half. It's like, ow, that looks really painful. And then as he's trying to climb up, he opens up a drawer and he grabs for something, and Caswell's like, oh no. And that's where he grabs a lamp and just smashes that thing over him. Like, it's violent.
The
it's
punch,
like, whoa.
not the first punch of that fight is amazing. It's so it feels so real. And then that fucking, like you were saying, that lamp, when that lamp shattered, I'm like, did they shatter a real fucking Tiffany style lamp or like desk lamp? You know what I mean? Like, those are heavy as shit. Those old ones, like it has like that brass bottom and then the heavy glass lampshade, and he just smashed that shit right over his head.
It was really convincing, and it like explodes over his head. Now, I don't want to gloss over. I mean, the violence it's really intense, but it's, to me, this whole I don't want to call it soliloquy, but it's like this whole thing that he's ranting on about. It's like, no, actually, like I get he's not a good guy, right? But also it's kind of a survival thing, right? So where's the line between following the law and surviving? And he's really pushing back against the brains and the elitists, that sort of idea of then, right? Of that time when you're people coming out in your trains rolling over the graves of men like me. It's just like, whoa, this is a very, like, kind of like last week. It's very much a societal commentary. Again, no question, he's a bad guy, but man, he really lays out his perspective to give him almost a little empathy, right? And it's interesting because when he does see the moments before this, he does actually get to see outside the window, and he looks outside the city, and he's like horrified. Like, the sound is overwhelming to him, and you think about that of just 80 years ago from that time, 1880. You got no cities that are that big. You've got no lights like that, no cars like that. The sound of New York, like, wow, that would be stunning. And so I think he really does a great job of showing that kind of intensity of his experience. So jumping back, smashes the crap out of him with that lamp, really intense. And then he's like, trying to figure out what to do next, and he goes out and he's running around the whole city, um, and he's like everything he runs into is freaking him out, right? So um, he's running down the street. He's almost gets run over by a car. He's runs into a phone booth, and like
Oh,
it's ringing. This is the part that Freddie was mentioning earlier. He goes you see a woman leave a phone booth, hangs up a call. The phone's ringing. He goes in there and he's like, "What is this thing?" And it's like there's someone talking to him on it. And as he's gone in, the door has automatically closed behind him. And so he's freaking out. He does a great job of showing himself like an animal trapped in a box. Again, like
yeah.
last week. Um, and he's freaking out and he's like, can't get out. He's like banging on the walls. And then they show a perspective from outside of it, and he just blasts through
He
that
just
phone
kicks.
booth.
It looks like he
Yeah.
kicks with both of his fucking legs against the opposite wall and
Yes.
pushes himself through not just the glass, but the metal and the glass and everything, and explodes
Yeah.
out of that damn thing. Like you said, that is one of the coolest moments in the Twilight Zone.
It was wild. It's like you don't see stunts like that
Yeah.
anymore, or it looks so convincing and it looks painful. Like you said, he kicks out and it's boom, and the whole thing shatters, and it's very like again, very like violent in the action. I'm pretty sure, unless I missed something, that part was actually him, because when he does it, it's all one shot. He blasts out, and then he turns around and gets up, and he's trying to wipe the blood off of himself because he got cut from doing that. But like I didn't see a clip. It wasn't like I kept expecting
The
to go to another
cut.
clip of close up, right? But it was all him, and he gets up and he starts running around, and he runs into a bar, and there's a jukebox playing, and he's freaking out like, stop the music, it's so damn loud. He starts smashing it, and the bartender's like, you're gonna pay for that. And he goes up to the bar and pulls out his gun, his 6-shooter, and puts it in the bar, and the guy's like, all right, well, maybe not.
And you know what,
Relaxes.
the 6-shooter he has now is the professor's more modern, like 38, isn't it?
No, I think he's
is
still
that
got
still
his
the
gun. I
same
think
one?
he's
Oh,
got a
okay.
big long barrel, yeah. And so the bartender, he's like, give me one of them bottles. He's like in shock. He's like super intense. And the bartender hands him a bottle, and it's got the little nozzle thing, so he only puts out a little bit at a time, So it's got a little dispenser, and he's like, what is this? He takes the top off and just tosses it and just guzzles from the bottle. And the guy's like, and he looks up, and the bartender's talking to him, but he's looking over the bartender's shoulder up at the wall. And he's like, what is that? Like he can't fathom what this thing is. And the bartender's like, oh, it's, you know what that is, right? And the guy's like, that's a window. And he goes, no, let me show you. He reaches up and turns a dial. And of course, it's a Western with a cowboy walking straight towards the camera, who's like, you better get your gun and draw. And Caswell's like freaking out. And of course, the cowboy draws, and Caswell draws first, shoots the TV, it falls down. He's like, you're gonna pay for that. The bartender's yelling at him.
He said, this is an expensive night for you, buddy. Basically, because he's like, you broke the jukebox, the television.
He's like, no, you're gonna pay for that. Police. That's the time when he's gonna yell,
He's like, my
And
life
so-
wasn't worth a jukebox, but my life is worth a jukebox plus a television set.
Plus a TV. You're banging up my place. And so Caswell takes off out of there, runs across the street, wipes out kind of in the dirt, and is kind of just, I don't know, he's like overtaken. But it's kind of a weird transition too then, because he's fell down in the dirt, and you can hear the police sirens in the background, but then it fades to him being back in the office. So apparently he must have gotten up and run back to the office. And he's sitting there, and he's talking to the professor. He's talking to Mannion, and he's like, you trying to figure out, like, help him. How do I get through this? He's like super desperate, and he's begging for help. And it's at that moment that somebody enters the room from behind him, just coincidentally. And this is the other Paul Johnson that you mentioned. He's just a small-time crook who's got a gun, and we don't know that until shortly after. He's like, hey, I was casing this joint, and it was nighttime, so I thought I'd come and check it out, and it looks like you took care of this guy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like talking to him. He's got the gun trained on him, and so he's like, oh, I'm just going to check the drawer for keys. And he's like, see, I told you, everybody's got a safe around here somewhere. He's opening up and he's checking things out. And Caswell actually is at some point when the guy's got the gun pointed at him, reaches down, just pulls the gun out of the way and yanks the guy over the desk. And I'm like, he's going to beat the crap out of this guy.
Yeah, he's way stronger than most of the people he encounters, physically stronger, I mean.
Because he's had a tough life, and right, he's got kind of toughness, and he's a thug. I don't know. So they go fighting back and forth, and at one point, he gets Caswell over near the mirror or the window, and he punches him, and Caswell kind of goes halfway out the window. I'm like, oh, is he gonna go flying out the window? He did not. He did not get yeeted out the window. But as he's kind of staggering back in, the Paul Johnson like comes over and wraps the cord from the window around his neck, iconic, and strangles him, and he dies. Right, so he falls down, and the Johnson's like, trying to figure out what to do next, and he's kind of checking things out, and he goes over and sees I should have mentioned earlier when the doctor and Caswell were talking earlier. When he first entered the room, he offered Caswell a cigarette and lit it with a lighter.
Zippo, yeah.
Yeah, and Caswell's like, "There's fire coming right out of that." He's just like,
well, didn't
stunned by
they had matches in the Old West?
They did have matches, but I don't wonder if he was fascinated by the whole lighter concept.
Yeah, I mean, it is a cool idea if you've never seen one, I would imagine.
Right, just fire emerging from something.
Yeah.
So that happens, and then fast forward now, the Johnson actually sees the lighter, picks up the lighter, and is like, I'll take this. And then he starts looking around for other stuff. And as he does, he's happens upon all the equipment on the wall for this time machine.
More Forbidden Planet shit.
Right. You can hear it when the dial turns on. You're like, oh, there's technology. Something's going to happen in space.
They haven't run out of pieces from Forbidden Planet yet.
And he turns on the dial, and then he's kind of stumbling around, and he goes and kind of looks in the time machine and walks inside, and the door closes behind him, and hey, hey, let me out of here, blah, 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 and disappears. And moments later, he reappears in the noose and is hanged in the past where Caswell was initially. And the preacher is there and the sheriff is there, and they're like, what? That's not the man who we condemned to die.
Well, that's a great shot too of it's like his Florsheim shoes and his casual slacks.
Yeah.
And, you just see the feet dangling there, but everyone else around him is in the Old West.
And they did it in the reverse. So they showed the shadow refilling the noose, and then they pan over and you see his shoes hanging there, and it's like, oh. So now he has returned to this place, and they cut him down and put him on the horse, and they're like, I don't know what this is, but we'll bury him all the same. And so they're wondering if it was whether they killed an innocent man or what, and so that's kind of left up to the question mark. And then we get the outro of this is November 1880 in the aftermath of a necktie party. The victim's name, Paul Johnson, a minor league criminal and taker of another human life. No comment on his death, save this: justice can span years. Retribution is not subject to a calendar. Tonight's case in point, in the Twilight Zone.
That was a good one. I really do love this episode. It's a shame that the darkness of Albert Salmi, how extreme that ended up. Because
now it makes me think like Did he take some of that darkness? Like, was that drawn from some personal experience or something?
I
Because
don't know. Maybe.
it's interesting.
It's only 30 years
Um,
later that he became a killer in real life.
Yeah, that's weird and creepy and so much interesting stuff around Twilight Zone actors. Next week is The Big Tall Wish, which I don't remember this one at all. So I'm very curious about how it is and how it
Yeah,
goes.
I don't know it from the title alone, so it'll be a surprise for me too.
Whee! All right. Thanks, everybody.